Okay, everyone. Sorry for the delay. This is my third talk today. So I just finished my second one like 10 minutes ago. So I am moving through um, getting reestablished. Can everyone hear? Can the people hear? Um, Absolutely. So welcome to those of you who are new to the space. I'm always late, so you should always know that. I think, you know, that's just kind of how it is. um, and and we roll with it. So, welcome everyone again. Welcome to our old ones coming back into the space. It's so good to be with everyone, um, as well. And yeah, today, if there are any questions, or in case, if you're new, questions go into the ask a question box. And we'll get to those later on. So I really wanted just to start off with some practice tonight. And I think that I don't know if I remember if I said on Monday night if there was something that I was going to continue to address or to talk about, but in general, I just want to continue, um, really, reminding us about the Mahamudra teachings. I know some of you sit with Lama Justin. This Sunday, we're starting Sunday service again. And Sunday service will be actual Sunday service of Matara and Mahamudra will be once a month now. And then we're going to also do a new practitioners group as well. So for those of you who are new to, just to anything really, to practice, to really just to practice, right? Please join us for the new practitioner group as well. But on Sunday, we'll be back to sitting Mahamudra and so forth. So we may do some of that work tonight as well. I was just giving a talk on, just some brokenheartedness and the apocalypse. And, that's something that we have to always keep in our practice, right? We always have to stay in proximity to brokenheartedness. And some of you say, oh, I'm always brokenhearted, I'm always there, but are we actually allowing ourselves to experience the brokenheartedness? Right? Are we remembering that the brokenheartedness is just an expression of the mind, right? In the very same way that waves rise out of the ocean, we may say, oh, that's a wave, but never do we say that the wave is something other than the water of the ocean, right? And it's the same thing with anything that arises within the mind, like when thoughts, emotions arise from the mind, we say, yeah, that's a thought, that's an emotion, but we never, within Mahamudra, we don't say, well, and that's other than the nature of the mind. A thought and emotion is the same essence of the mind as the mind itself. This is a view and a mentality that we have to train in, and we have to train in this view, this mentality, as much as possible. Like it becomes a mind training. I want to actually teach a course on Lojong for you. I know many of you haven't really studied Lojong, but many of these teachings come out of Lojong. It comes out of the system of mind training. It comes out of these slogans, that help us to train and understanding what the mind is and the essence of the mind. I just think, Lojong is really important teachings. We'll try to get something started later this year, but even as we're continue to move through pandemic and political unrest and moving through yet another impeachment trial, which I'm not watching because I've seen that movie before, honey. It's one of those movies where the sequel is going to be just like the original. So why even pay the money? I'm just going to wait till it comes out on Amazon Prime, and Netflix. Don't go to the movies and see that show. You know, it's to look out at the world and to see everything happening over and over and over and over again, and you say, you know, the essence of all of this is the same, like the essence, the emptiness, the spaciousness, the energy. It's just like all one thing. It's all the same thing happening over and over and over again. When we think about particularly indigenous studies, indigenous culture, indigenous philosophy, we talk about patterns, and we can align that really closely with the system of Mahamudra, where we're learning to become aware, to develop an awareness around the patterns. The mind is a pattern, things happen in a way that are generally they're generally like can be predicted. They're predictable, right? And this is how Lojong works, is that there's a predictability to life, to the mind, to the body. There's a pattern. When we look, we'll leave indigeneity here for a second, but when we look at the general philosophies of Buddhism in general, we're talking about patterns and circles, right? We're talking about ways in which we find ourselves in cycles. Samsara is a cycle, right? There's a cycle of birth and rebirth, right? Bardos, there's cycles. Death is a cycle. Thoughts arising from the mind and returning back to the mind is a cycle. The grandest cycle that we're working through is the cycle of having emerged, maybe from the sense of oneness, this experience of oneness or big mind, and going back and coming back eventually to return to rest back within that experience of one mind. And that resting is what we call nirvana, the realization of the cycle, breaking through the illusions, is called enlightenment. So we get enlightened, and then we choose to move into rest as well. But we talk about indigeneity. Indigeneity, when we look at how indigenous communities around the world have related to the phenomenal world, there's a recognition of how the phenomenal world is just a series of patterns that we're learning to become aware of, and that recognition of patterns is how indigenous community, indigeneity functions to be sustainable. Sustainability arises out of recognizing patterns. Recognizing, very like tangibly, we recognize that if we're not, taking care of the earth in certain ways, then there will be this disruption for us. There will be a change in the climate. Well, there is a change in the climate, right? So that's a pattern. We do something and then something else happens. We know this pattern is also part of this of karma. Karma is a pattern. We create something, and then we have to live through the fruition of what we create. We don't destroy or create energy, but we stir energy around. Like we move with an energy. The ripples begin to move outward as we're moving within this energy, and those ripples will come back to us. And that's a pattern. Like everything that I put into the world will come back to me, in some form, in some fashion. Understanding that pattern, right? Understanding that pattern, it actually helps us to sit in a kind of agency as well. We're sitting in a kind of agency, where we know what's up, we know what's going on, and we're able just to be there. with what's going on. It's not a surprise. Yes, there is the reality of impermanence, as well, but there's still patterns and impermanence as well, that we become aware of, in our practice. So when we begin to look at the mind and we move through the qualities of the mind, we're learning to look at patterns of the mind, what's happening, how they're happening, right? And I think at the beginning, when we first start developing practice, it can be quite difficult to maintain this kind of connection to the mind, or to recognize the mind in these series of patterns itself, right? So we're going to just start practice, and I want to just casually move into practice, so the first kind of instruction I want to give is just to begin to just casually and formally just turn attention into the mind, and you just begin to look at thoughts and emotions. This is why I also call the check-in stage. I'm just checking in with myself. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? If we have the capacity to be with the body, to be with physical sensation, I also invite you to turn that attention into the physical sensation. Right, just checking in. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? Even naming that, I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling tired. I feel hungry. Whatever it may be. I feel happy. I feel joyful. I feel grateful. Just spending just a little bit of time noticing, paying attention to that, and naming these experiences. We want to name it, let it go, move on to finding another experience. Again, just checking in, just noticing. And just also at some point moving into recognizing that what you're noticing is happening within your experience. Like, this is my experience that this is happening. And we do this step because this is how we cultivate a sense of agency. For those of us who are coming out of various kinds of oppressions, we want at any point in our practice, at many points of our practice, to reclaim agency and to say, no, I want to actually self-identify in this moment, this really skillful moment, with what's arising in my experience. There's also a function of groundedness. I want to come back to myself by naming what's happening within myself. And then I encourage you to move into experiencing. Like, what does this feel like? What do these various experiences in my mind and my body actually feel like? And that's letting go of the conceptual and moving into sensation and energy itself. Experience, we're not in this stage of experiencing, we're not trying to articulate anything. We're just trying to show up. How does this feel? Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Is it neutral? Where is this showing up at? What are the parameters and boundaries and borders of this experience? Now we can transition into beginning to relate to the mind as an ocean, as a vast ocean, wide open, clear, spacious, without boundaries or borders. It's like standing at the edge of the seashore and just looking out into the vast, limitless expanse of the ocean. And this becomes our minds. And even if we're imagining just looking out over the ocean, we begin to mingle our awareness with the vastness, the depth, and the expanse and the clarity of the ocean itself that we're imagining. Slowly, our awareness begins to expand into ocean like mind. I wonder if you can just really rest within the spaciousness, this, this fluid ocean like mind. So, as thoughts or emotions m- may get distracting, in the practice, I invite you to, as they arise, to offer the energy of these thoughts and emotions back into the ocean of the mind, the space of the mind, just like waves rising from the ocean, and letting these waves return back by intentionally letting go, offering it back over and over again. So you have a distracting thought, recognize it, and then imagine just offering it back, letting it go, sending it back into the spaciousness of your mind. We'll slowly begin to transition out of this practice by just bringing our attention to our seats, just noticing the weight of our bodies, making contact with the seat. Letting the seat hold us, letting the seat take care of us. And now just kind of stepping out of the practice and bringing some awakening movement back to your body, stretching and so forth. And so I hope that was helpful for you. This is, so much of a practice that we're trying to do every day as much as possible to this kind of spaciousness. We're trying to touch into this as much as possible throughout our day, because we're living these kinds of lives where we just get really contracted around things that arise in the mind. That contraction comes out of reactivity. So we're just reacting, often in ways that are just very unconscious. So we're trying to disrupt the reactivity, and rest within the spaciousness. And then within that spaciousness, we choose to respond instead of just reacting. We're just choosing to respond. And then, this is what we're trying to get to. It's just the space of choosing to respond. No, but we have to practice too. You can't, we can't see the change we want to see until we put things into practice and have a constant practice. We're doing this as much as possible, whatever feels appropriate for us. Consistent practice, and we have to define what consistent, of course, means for us, right? But consistent practice. And it is hard at the beginning. I'll talk more about this in our new practitioner beginning, which is open to everyone. You don't have to be a new practitioner, but I'll talk about this more later this month, where it's, it's just at the beginning of a practice, it's hard. It's when I first started to meditate, I just didn't get it. I was just really, I was just really confused as to why anyone would want to meditate. why anyone? I was full of so much suffering, so much trauma, so much trauma, and I would sit for like a minute, and this is not, an exaggeration, because I would time myself because I had to set these goals, and I remember I could only go to like a minute. I could only do 60 seconds of watching my mind before it just got so overwhelming for me. And that's where I started. That's where I started, just doing 60 seconds of practice. And then I quit, then I came back to it, and, a little bit of stopping and starting, right? But I just tried to push on as much as I could, and it deepened and deepened. And I would meet teachers, or I would meet practices, or, that would just deepen my capacity, right? When I met Lama Sering Wangdu Rinpoche, so Wangdu Rinpoche, Sering Wangdu, or we say just Lama Wangdu. Lama Wangdu was the first Tibetan teacher that I sat with, and unbeknownst to me back then, Lama Wangdu was also one of Lama Justin's teachers. But this is back in like 2000, early 2000s, right? And sitting with Lama Wangdu, my first time I met him, I was living in Boston, and he came and did a week long, a week of teachings, right, all over Boston. And I went to all the teachings, like it was every night. And he did, the first night I went to see him, he did a healing cha practice. And the first night, the instructions were for everyone to bring a blanket and a pillow to the teaching. And I just was like, I was just like, this is my kind of teaching. I was like, I don't know if we're going to meditate or do something else, but whatever it is, like, I am in for it. I am there. So I brought my blanket and my pillow, and then we all get there into the practice hall. And then we're told to, everyone just spread out, everyone spread out and, make pallets and get really comfortable. And then Rinpoche comes in, and he's like, okay, I'm just gonna sit and chant, right? I'm just gonna sit and chant, and everyone just go to sleep, and again, I was like, whoever thought that Buddhism and the practice of meditation could be so great? It was like Yoga Nidra. It was like I didn't know anything about Yoga Nidra back then, but Yoga Nidra is like, we always say Yoga Nidra is like the practice of like mindful sleeping, I think it's much more complex than that. But like, I think back then that kind of healing yoga, the healing cha, was really offered as like a Yoga Nidra, as a rest practice. And so, it was long, over an hour. And so I remember everyone just lying down. Maybe it was like 40 or 50 of us all spread out over this, hall. And, and Rinpoche pulls out the Kongling, Thapong Kongling, and the Chö drum and the bells, and just starts chanting and playing. And we just, I just was knocked out. I was knocked out. And then afterwards, you go home. And then the next day I woke up. Back then, I had a job that I had to be at work at like 7. So I would get up at like 5, to sit an hour, to do an hour of practice every morning. I would do an hour of practice in the morning and do an hour in the afternoon after I got off of work. And I remember that first morning after the first day of sitting with Lama Wangdu, I sat and did my practice, just my meditation practice, and just the level of clarity and spaciousness for that I experienced was profound. That Rinpoche in that practice had removed a block, an obstacle for me, and my practice just expanded after that initial healing session with Rinpoche. Of course, I stayed, I kept going back to different teachings. He was doing a lot of severance teaching, a lot of Vajrayogini teaching as well. I remember very clearly, and I got a chance to have a meeting with him, an interview with him, which was really wonderful. And yeah, these practices, the ways in which these practices can be transmitted from a teacher to student can remove a lot of obstacles for us in our practice, a lot of moving around of energies and so forth. And then years later, after I finished three-year retreats, I was in DC, and I would spend, probably like a couple of days a month in New York, for various reasons. And, one of those trips is when I met Justin and connected um, to his center. And then that's when we realized that we had a teacher in common with Lama Wangdu, and Lama Wangdu also would come to New York quite often. And we would have him at the center, and then we would go out into Queens where he would be staying and hang out with him. And we were doing that up until last year, of course, with the quarantine. It was just something that we just kind of did together. Yeah, this is the importance of being with teachers in the tantric Vajrayana path. Like, you have to have a really realized, profound teacher. I'm not saying I'm realized or profound, right? I do the best I can, but it propels us on the path when we're getting energetic transmissions from realized teachers. And I've been very fortunate to have a lot of those teachers in my life to help me proceed on the path. But those times of the center, having that center in Brooklyn, it was actually two centers over the time in Brooklyn with Lama Justin. It wasn't, I would just come and visit, but he and his teaching partner, Lama Sangye, were running the centers there. But I would just come, and there was, as soon as I met Justin and Sangye, hopefully Sangye will do something with us one day. We have to get him back. But it was just a lot of fun. I had my own center in DC, and we were having a lot of fun in DC. We're having fun. But then I would take a break and run away from my center to go live with them in Brooklyn, for a couple of days every month. It was just wild. There was a lot of people coming through, a lot of different teachers, a lot of profound practicing happening. Yeah, it was a good times, good days. Any other questions too? We don't have to stay till 9:30. But any other questions that I can move you through before we wrap up for tonight? All right, cool. Thank you. It's good to see you, Kyle. Hope you're doing well. Um, yeah, just the bit of navigating the activeness of offering our thoughts into the ocean with simply being the ocean. Yeah, the offering itself can be very nuanced and subtle. I just say offering to get us into the energy of letting go. But for some of us, it's a really like the spaciousness is just there. So what the arising of energy in the form of thoughts and emotions is just really the subtle stirring of the water, right? And so we can be with that subtle stirring. And it's just really just lets it releases itself back into that spaciousness. But if you're at the very beginning of practice, if this is like a brand new practice, I think it's important just to start with like just consciously letting go, offering back, and over time that becomes much more nuanced and subtle over time. um, Tips for tapping to the ocean of the mind without drowning, and I guess examining practice as applied to mental health support. And I just think that it's the quality of awareness that keeps us from drowning. So when we say drowning, it's equivalent to being overwhelmed. This is like this moment when we lose the energy of awareness, and so you move into numbness and overwhelm. So in the practice, you're remaining aware, like you're meditating essentially on the quality of spaciousness itself. So the spaciousness, and we can say emptiness too, right? But that openness, that spaciousness is the object of meditation in that moment. That's the anchor. So in Mahamudra, we would say emptiness. This is similar space. So in my system, in my thinking, I I also talk about I kind of like weed out space and emptiness as two qualities too, which I think for some people it may be very controversial. But whenever I ever offered a teaching that wasn't controversial, but in my practice, talking about space and emptiness has been helpful for me to move into the experience of wide openness itself. That there's emptiness, but emptiness can feel really nihilistic and void and cold. And when we bring space in, you know, space can help that, but then we bring in luminosity on top of that, which I call potentiality. So that energy, that potentiality for all phenomena to arise, that energy, that light, it's the kind of thing that warms that space, and emptiness. But anyway, going back to the basic question is, I want to support a sense of foundation is to really actively rest awareness within like the sense of space itself. So the awareness remains active. And when that awareness is active, then there's nothing that can be drowned, or overwhelmed. All right. Well, so I'm gonna go ahead and call it for the night. Um, I will bid thee farewell. Thank you so much. I'm going to be with you again next week, and then after that, Sister Sadada will join us for the last Wednesday of the month, and then we'll have a new cycle starting in March. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Again, the program's happening this week. We have Losar celebrations this weekend. I'm doing yoga on Saturday. I'm also doing, again, Sunday service 10 to 1 Eastern Standard Time on Sunday as well. So please join us for these programs as well. And I'll see you again later this week, hopefully. All right. Bye, everyone.